Sir, the possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1.
Never tell me the odds.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Unlimited Limited. So this video is going to be sort of a continuation video from the last episode, the beginner draft guide that I did. I'll put a link in the description if you haven't seen that yet. That video is very much geared for beginners, but also has some good general tips that this video very much builds upon. So even if you're a little bit more experienced, I would highly recommend checking that video out and then coming back here. It'll just make this video make a lot more sense in a continuity sort of way. So as you get better at drafting, or playing any game or doing any hobby really, it's just as you get better at something, the improvements you make tend to become a little bit more incremental, right? Like smaller and smaller. So for example, if you go from never drafting removal in Star Wars to drafting removal, you would expect your win rate to go up massively, right? Whereas if you contrast that with some of the tips in this video about like maybe when you take a 4-drop versus a 5-drop, stuff like that, right? Like that, those are very incremental changes and will, maybe affect one in every, 80 games that you play, but those little things can really add up over time. So that's true with many skills. Maybe 1 in 80 is a little bit dramatic, but you know what I mean, right? The better you get at something, then as you continue to get better, it sort of levels off and it's very slow incremental progress. So let's talk about some good intermediate and advanced draft tips that will help you take your game to the next level. So the first thing that I can recommend, and probably the most important intermediate tip, is to know the format. Right? If you go into, I'm going to use Jump to Lightspeed as an example, but this is true in general. So Jump to Lightspeed, as a refresher, if you're watching this video far in the future, is a set that focuses pretty heavily on vehicles. There's a lot of synergy with things like fighters, with Luke the leader, and just a lot of vehicle stuff in general. If you went and drafted Jump to Lightspeed and you didn't know anything about the format, even if you're a pretty observant person and you maybe notice, halfway through pack 2, oh, this set must have a vehicle theme. There's a lot of vehicles that I'm seeing. It's probably too late for you to really meaningfully work that into your game plan. Whereas if you even just did 5 minutes of research ahead of time, just find a quick crash course or a primer or something and even just skim through it. You don't need to know what every card does. Goodness knows I don't. Yeah, even just looking at a primer and reading for 5 minutes about what the themes are in a set will help you massively. This tip matters less at the beginning of a new format because everybody's kind of still figuring it out. But even then, it's good to know because, again, everybody's still figuring it out. But if other people have been reading draft primers maybe and you haven't, or sealed primers in the case of a pre-release, then they might know that, again, for example, Jump to Lightspeed is a vehicle set, and you wouldn't know that, right? So even at the beginning of the set, it matters, but especially by the end of the set, if you're going in, the last few weeks of a set and you don't know anything about it, which is probably pretty unlikely if you're tuned into a video like this, but if that were to happen, I think you'd be at a pretty major disadvantage compared to people who had even a little bit of reading. So that's sort of the biggest thing. The next thing I'm going to mention is table and signals. So, of course, Star Wars Unlimited is designed to be drafted with 8 people, but it's still a great experience to draft with 6 people or 10 people. I've drafted with as few as 4 people. It was fun. It was a different experience, but it was fun. And I think I've drafted with as many as 11 people at my table. And those are both quite different experiences. 8 is sort of what it's designed for. I would say 6 is fine, 10 is fine. Anything beyond that, and you're kind of getting a different experience. You can sort of draft a little bit differently depending on how many people are at your table because of wheels. And when I say wheel, if you haven't heard that term before, that just means I open my pack, I take a card out, and I'm like, I really want that one to come back, right? Because it's going to go around the table, and eventually that pack is going to come back to you. And the colloquial term is you wield that card if it came all the way around the table back to you, if it wheeled all the way around the table. So, if your table has 6 people in it, you're a lot more likely to wheel a card than if it has 10 people in it. So you can kind of work that into your game plan. In general, you shouldn't bank on wheeling cards. That's not a great strategy necessarily. You shouldn't take a really good card that's only really good if you get this other card to come back, right? That's not something you should generally do. There maybe are exceptions to that, but they would be pretty few and far between. Generally, don't bank on wheeling a card. It's more just I'll take this, and it'll be nice if this one comes back. If it's maybe a card that isn't played very often or a card that requires a specific synergy that you're not expecting other people to have. It can maybe act as a tiebreaker, like if there's a command card and a vigilance card in the pack, and you're like really even between the two, but there's like a chance that this one command card wheels, maybe that sort of is the tiebreaker that you need to take it. And the threshold for that tiebreaker might be different at a 6-person, or will be different at a 6-person or a 10-person pod. So that's something that you probably should keep in mind. Again, never expect it to wheel. It probably will not, but it might. So next I'm going to quickly talk about curve filling and synergies. Also, I'm sort of following my article that I wrote on StarWarsUnlimited.gg, so go check that out. It's free. I'll probably put a link if I remember. So I sort of opened this section on the article by saying, good drafters know that their deck should be loaded with 2 and 3 cost cards, and great drafters know when to break that rule, right? So generally, as I said earlier, with incremental improvement, right? If you know nothing about draft and you're just taking whatever, and someone says, hey, you should maybe be drafting a lot of 2 and 3 cost cards, your win rate is going to go up massively, right? Than if you just have like this random nonsense curve. But now it's about those incremental improvements. It's like, okay, when can I ignore that good 2-cost card? When does that make sense? And there are obvious circumstances, right? Like if there's a bomb, right? Let's say you open up, I don't know, if you're drafting Spark the Rebellion and you open up Han, the 6/6 ambush that has like first strike. Yeah, sure, then you take that over like a good 2-drop or a good 3-drop, right? And then also there's the case of removal, right? Like it's a pretty common wisdom that removal is good in draft or just in general. So something like Takedown, if again you're drafting Spark of the Rebellion, something like Takedown would be a completely reasonable and expected thing to take over a 2 or 3 cost card. But that's not what I'm talking about in this section, because I think I talked about those in my beginner guide. What I'm talking about here are cards that aren't really bombs or pieces of removal, but are more things that just you can diverge from your curve plan a little bit to help with your synergy plan a little bit. So these cards, in my opinion, need to have 2 criteria. The first one is that when I play this card, it will massively improve my chances of winning, and I can play it consistently. That's one criteria. I know I said an and, but it's one criteria. So like, again, the example I give in the article, I say obviously a card like Annihilator, right? The 11/11, whatever, or maybe it's a 12/12, I don't know. Big ship. Obviously, when you play that, it's probably going to win you the game unless you lose immediately. But playing that consistently is unreliable, right? I'm talking about cards like Commander Cody from Twilight of the Republic that is kind of a little bit underwhelming on its own. I believe it's a 5-cost card, which you do want 5-cost cards in your deck for sure, but you don't want like too many of them. It's a 5-cost card, it's a little bit underwhelming, but in the right deck, you know, if you're really getting there on the synergy plan with like a lot of going wide tokens and whatever, then that could be generally the best card in your deck, and you absolutely would take it over a 2 or 3 cost card. So it's important to like think about when you want to break that 2 or 3 cost rule. In general, I personally, and this is different drafters who are very skilled have different preferences on this, but what I personally like to do is I like to build up kind of the basics, again, assuming I don't get like some bomb I want to build around. I build up like the basics, like I get a really good curve going, I get good removal, and then maybe in like later in pack 2 or in pack 3, if I see one of those synergy pieces, then I can take it there. Some drafters like to start by taking the synergy pieces early on when they're uncontested, and then trying to build around them, and that's a perfectly fine strategy as well. Just know what your plan is and stick with it there. But so I guess the other criteria that's important is, do you have enough early cost cards that you can afford to take it? So again, let's go back to that example. I'm drafting Twilight of the Republic. I have a really good tokens deck being built. It's looking awesome. Someone passes me a Clone Commander Cody, and I look down at my deck and I'm like, this would be awesome here. I have all this token generation, but I have like 1 2-drop and 1 3-drop. And then I look back at the pack and there's like a really efficient like 2-cost card. It's like, I would love to take the Clone Commander Cody, but I might just need to take that curve filler instead, right? Like, can I afford to take this, like, maybe, I guess, more exciting piece, or do I need to eat my vegetables and, you know, get my curve going first? Because, you know, it doesn't matter if my token deck is so awesome and has all the synergy pieces if it doesn't come online until like turn 6, right? You need to be able to build up early. So to summarize, the 2 big things I look for when I'm trying to evaluate whether or not I want to break the take a good 2-drop rule is, can I play the card reliably, and will it win me will it massively increase my win rate when I play it? And do I have enough of that early curve that I can justify losing maybe a tiny bit of consistency on turn 1 and 2 in order to play this nice synergy piece? So let's talk a little bit about deck building. This is a pretty short section. Luckily, in Star Wars Unlimited, deck building is actually like pretty straightforward if you've done the draft portion right. You're probably going to end with like 30 plus or minus like 2 or 3 cards that are on aspect. So you just run all of those. Obviously, cutting or adding cards, depending on if you're over or under, takes some skill for sure. And I think I talked about that a little bit in my beginner guide. But in here, I'll just kind of reiterate. You should probably be playing as few off-aspect cards as you can, with the exception of efficient removal pieces. An example I think I've given before is Direct Hit, the 4-cost removal from Jump to Lightspeed that destroys a non-leader vehicle. I will play that in basically every deck. I personally just treat it as a 6-cost vehicle removal event that sometimes is 4-cost if I happen to be playing Vigilance. I think that is good enough in Jump to Lightspeed, and oftentimes removal will be like that. Takedown might have been an example. I didn't draft a ton of Spark the Rebellion because product scarcity. I tried to as much as I could, but definitely I would highly, highly, highly recommend running as few off-aspect cards as you can. But sometimes it's even right to cut on-aspect cards for cards like that efficient removal, like Direct Hit. Sometimes it's right to do that. So whenever you do that, though, consider your removal package as it exists already, because, I'm talking like paying 2 extra is nothing, and it's not. It is something. Paying 6 for that effect is definitely a lot. The fact that it doesn't hit leaders if they like flip onto the ship, again, Jump to Lightspeed specific example, I'm trying to keep this general, that is a lot. And if you already have good removal in, say, I don't know, green, red, command aggression, and you have really good removal, maybe you don't need to run that. But oftentimes, as we know, in draft removals at a premium, you're probably not going to get as much as you want, so running those off-aspect cards does make sense when you're doing your deck building. Just make sure you place it appropriately whenever you're laying out your curve, that it is, the +2. In terms of if you were under 30 cards and you need to play off-aspect cards, early on in the draft portion, you should be staying reasonably open, and you're probably going to draft like 1 or 2 cards that are heroism or villainy whenever you're the other one. And those are often very strong contenders for your 30th card, right? Because they'll be otherwise on aspect, just the wrong heroism or villainy. You put them in, they are a little bit more expensive. Just again, make sure it fits with your curve. That is really, really the biggest thing. I've talked too long about deck building for really the amount of advice that I have to give you. Truly, it's just make sure that your curve is good, and don't be scared paying a little bit extra for good removal. That's sort of the biggest thing. Just again, curve. We're going to talk a little bit about hate drafting now. So in the actual draft portion, you may have heard of hate drafting, especially if you've come from Magic. Hate drafting, if you don't know, is the act of taking cards while you're drafting that you know that you're not going to play. They're not going into your deck. You're just solely taking them because you know that somebody near you is in that color, usually someone sitting right beside you. Maybe pack 1, you've gotten a lot of signals that they're in, let's say, Vigilance, and you open a crazy Vigilance bomb in pack 2 and it's going back to them. A hate draft would be you taking that Vigilance card, even though you know you're not going to play Vigilance or that card, just so that you don't have to play against that card in their deck. This is a strategy, and I mentioned this in my article, I'll mention it here, that is kind of frowned upon in casual play, I find. And I personally don't do it a ton of casual play. I don't really mind if other people do it, but it entirely depends on what play group you're with and the sort of stakes. And the reason for that is just because you're deliberately making your opponent's decks worse, right? And in a casual environment, you're just like there to go and play your cards and have fun. But of course, it's a very important part of competitive, serious drafting for Star Wars Unlimited or Magic or anything like that. So when should you do it? So in the scenario I just described, hate drafting bombs is very risky because there's a good chance that if there's a bomb still in the pack that you can hate draft from somebody else. then there's probably something in that pack for you. It's probably early enough in the pack that there is a pretty good card for you, right? Like if I open a new pack, right, as pack 2, and there's this crazy legendary bomb that my opponent would definitely be playing, and I take it, there's 13 other cards in there, some of which are probably at the very least good enough to be in my deck, and more than likely quite good in my deck, right? Like I'm probably passing like maybe a removal spell, maybe a really efficient unit that synergizes with my deck to do that, right? Like that's something that can happen. So generally, unless the bombs are like actually unbeatable in like a format warping kind of way, I'm probably not going to be hate drafting bombs. The time that I like to hate draft in a particularly competitive event is later on in the pack, right? Maybe it comes back around and there's, you're looking at it and you're like, none of these cards really go into my deck. Maybe this one kind of could, but there's a whole nother pack left, and I'll probably get something that fills the role better than this, and I'll just end up cutting this anyway. And then you're like, oh, and there's also, I don't know, Rival's Fall or something in this pack, right? And it's like, oh, okay, well, the guy to my right is playing Vigilance. He's definitely going to want this card. I'm probably not paying 8 for Rival's Fall. But I'll take this because I don't really care about anything else in this pack. And then if I play against him, I don't have to worry about at least this copy of Rival's Fall. Maybe he's drafted another, but at least this copy. So you are making your opponent's deck worse, and then if you end up playing against them, that might pay off. The other thing with hate drafting, right, is you also might just never play against that person, right? You make their deck worse, you never see them in a match. And there's like nuance with matchmaking and brackets and everything like that. But yeah, so hate drafting is a very, very tiny margin on improving your win rate, but it's something that you absolutely can do if you're interested in those tiny things and the event is sufficiently competitive for it. Again, I wouldn't really recommend like being a very serious hate drafter at like a super casual event, but that's totally up to you and your play group. So who am I to judge? Okay, let's get into the bulk of this. So I don't think I mentioned I did a bunch of math for this video, so I'm gonna turn that on. First of all, this video is meant to be very general, but for the purpose of the math that I'm about to show you guys, I had to pick sort of one specific set to do it with, and I chose Jump to Lightspeed because it's the current set. So definitely the math will change a tiny bit on different sets, but in general, this is like a pretty good approximation. So you sit down at your draft table, you've done the leader draft, and you get into pack 1. What can you expect to see? You can expect to see about 3.15 of each aspect's cards in your pack. So a little bit over 3 in each of them. Of course, you don't get to have fractional cards. It is going to be 3 or 4 or 2 or 5 or whatever. And I got these numbers by simulating 1 million pack openings. I wrote a little bit of Python. And so this is how I got these numbers here. You'll notice that adding them together does not get to 14, which is the amount of non-leader, non-base cards in your pack. That's expected. Not all cards have one of these aspects. Some of them are just heroism or just villainy or no aspect. So this is what you'll expect to see just looking down at that pack 1, pick 1 scenario. And here are their distributions. You can't really see the tail end of red because my camera's in the way, but it looks kind of like the tail end of all the other ones. So in these distributions, again, you can see that 3 is sort of the mode, right? The most likely option for any of them. And for the rest of this analysis, we'll be talking just about command, just because it looks kind of the same for all of them, because there's approximately the same number of each of these cards at each rarity in the set. All right, so let's talk about the scenario where you sit down and you see a bomb in command. So you take this and you're really excited and you're like, I'm definitely playing command. I have a good leader for it. Or maybe I don't. Maybe I'm going to choose a green base. But I have this card and I'm really interested in playing command. Now, of course, in that scenario, it's still possible that people all around you might have had a very similar experience and now they want to play command too. And in that case, even though you open an awesome command bomb, you probably don't want to be playing command. So I've simulated a few scenarios here, again, using Python. And you can kind of see if the person directly to your right that's passing to you, if they took a command card, you would expect the average number of command cards in your deck to be one lower. I think those numbers aren't exactly one lower because of I think they had a slightly different sample size, and I didn't let this one run as long as that one, so it didn't converge on the exact same, but don't worry. In principle, it should be, you can think of it as exactly one lower. So you would expect to see 2 cards on average, approximately. That's the most likely option. Now, does that mean if pick 2 you see 2 command cards that the person to the right of you definitely took a command card? No, of course not, right? It's possible, again, looking down at your pack 1, pick 1, there's like a 23% chance that there's 4 command cards in that pack, and then you would be over in this 3 zone here if they took 1, right? But let's continue on. Let's describe sort of a worst case scenario, as I've sort of done in brackets here. What happens if, what did I do? There we go. What happens if the 3 people to your right are all taking command cards? Well, then you would expect it to diminish quite strongly, right? So the next pack, you would have an average of 1.24 command cards. The next pack, you would have an average of 0.576 command cards. So by pick 4, there's a 60% chance, a little bit over 60% chance, that there would be 0 command cards in the pack if everybody had previously taken a command card. Which is definitely a sign. If you see no command cards by the time you're around here, you would probably should reconsider whether or not you're going to be in command. This is this is wrong. This should say 2 and this should say 3. That's okay. Good, but this is also not a very realistic scenario. Usually you don't see everybody beside you in the exact same aspect. This is kind of, again, a very bad scenario if you start a command. Let's do a slightly more realistic scenario. So where the person right beside you is definitely in command, so we know what that looks like, right? And then the other people are in something random. So maybe command, maybe not, just like over, again, I think I simulated a million different tables here. So you would expect the average number of command cards in pick 3 to be about 2, and in pick 4 to be about 1.82. So once again, if you see 13% of the time on pick, pick 4, you would expect to see 0 command cards, even if the only person who's like really in command is the person to your right. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as well. So this is the best case. I'm not really going to spend too much time talking about this because it's like somewhat obvious. If nobody's taking green, the distribution kind of stays the same. You expect to see 3.15 green cards or command cards per pack. If it's pick 4 and you still see, the 20% of the cases where you see 4 command cards, then you found your lane. Congratulations, good work. You're in the right zone. Well skilled. So let's talk about a potential scenario, right? This is kind of an interesting exercise. It's just sort of it doesn't really have an exact practical application, as I'll discuss in a minute, but it does kind of, at least for me, help me think a little bit statistically. Like in pick 1, we've already seen this. This is what this looks like, and then pick 2. Do you think that this person took a command card, or do you think that they just took a random card? And in this case, these distributions look very similar. You would expect them to have just taken a random card. But then if we look down here, oh, well, it looks like someone to your right, in the 2 seats to your right, has taken a random or a command card. You can see that the distribution really shifted down. And then here, it looks kind of similar. Someone probably just took a random card. And then here, it looks like someone, once again, took a command card by pick 5. Maybe 2 of the command cards have been taken on average, right? Or at least 2 players are forcing command at that point, and the others are picking randomly. You can also run a similar simulation where you say that 2 players are taking command and 2 players are definitely not, and it does yield a similar result. I decided that choosing at random is probably a more useful metric, but I'm open to criticism on that. I can assure you, though, that the results are very similar. So in terms of building statistical intuition, it's probably equally helpful. So how does this actually help you, right? It kind of doesn't, because this is simulating a million tables at once and giving you a probability distribution. We don't really see probability distributions, right? When I sit down to draft, I see one discrete point. I have 3 green cards in front of me on pick 2, right? And, that could have shown up in any number of these distributions, right? I can't see all of the infinite possibilities and, exactly calculate my optimal pick based on what everyone else is doing. I have one data point and I have to make a decision based on that. So how do we do that? All I know is how many cards are in front of me and what pick number it is. Those are the 2 sort of data points that I have, right? It's one coordinate in a space of probability in a space of number of cards and pick number. Luckily, I got to move this again so you guys can see Bayes' theorem. Look at that. But luckily, there are tools in probability that help us out with this. So one such tool is Bayes' theorem, which I highly recommend you check out a video on in a dedicated sense. And, really try to a little bit understand exactly what's going on under the hood here, because this video is not that. I'm not going to sort of derive Bayes' theorem or, really go into it. But I will give a really brief introduction just to show what exactly it's telling us here. And if you're not like a math person, don't worry. We're not going to do any like hard math. I'm just going to explain what each of the letters mean, and then we're going to just plug numbers in. So Bayes' theorem tells us something about conditional probability. So, what's the probability of something happening given that something else happened? That's what Bayes' theorem really tries to tell us about. So, really quick disclaimer before we get into this. I don't have a ton of formal stats education. So it's definitely possible that some of what I'm saying here isn't entirely correct, or it lacks nuance, or I missed a important crucial detail. Grain of salt. Don't treat me as an authority on anything stats related, and look into this on your own. But this is just sort of meant to pique your curiosity, and any stats heads that want to correct anything I say in the comments, by all means do that. In my next video, I'll be sure to correct myself and appropriately credit whoever corrected me. So I appreciate that. So what each of these mean, this one on the left here represents the probability of event B, given that the probability that event A happened. This PAB here is the probability of A, given that the event B happened. This PB here is the probability that B happens. And then this 3 looking thing, this is called a sigma. It's a Greek letter, and it just represents the sum. So we are going to have a bunch of different probability distributions, and we're just summing over them, and this is just much nicer than writing each of them out. So for the denominator here. So now just plugging some things in. So as I was saying, when I'm doing a draft, I don't really have all these million probability distributions in front of me, right? I have one discrete point that you can think of. I have 2 data points that sort of form one coordinate in a space of number of command cards and draft pick, right? So, this particular example, right? I have, we're going to say, we're looking at pick 2, and I see 2 green cards. That's all I have. So plugging all of those things into Bayes' theorem, right? So the probability of B given A, this would be the probability that my opponent took a green card, given that I see 2 green cards in my pool, right? So that's what I'm looking for. And then this is the probability that I see 2 green cards in my pool, given that my opponent has taken a green card. So what is this probability? Well, we know this probability, right? We can scroll up and look for that. So let's say my opponent took a green card. I believe that's this one, right? Great. Well, the probability that there are 2 green cards in my pool if my opponent took a green card is a little bit over 30%. So we can plug in, 0.31 to represent 31%, or get the exact value from my Python program, whatever that ends up being. We plug that in here, and then, similarly for the remaining numbers, and we find that there is a 55% chance that my opponent took a green card if I see 2 green cards on pick 2. And similarly, you can do that for the other numbers as well, and you get sort of this distribution here. The key part of this sort of distribution, I'm going to move my camera. There we go. The key part of this sort of distribution is that the 100%, and later you'll see some 0% as well. Those are the really important ones in my opinion. There is a table here that has a bunch of these that I've run through. So if you see 0 green cards, there's a 100% chance that the person to the right of you took green, and that's because each pack there is guaranteed to be at least one of each of the Cunning, Command, Vigilance, and Aggression cards. Each pack does not guarantee a Heroism or Villainy card, but those 4 it does. So if you don't see a green card, then that means they definitely took a green card, which is a handy metric to look at. If you ever look at a pack and it's pick 2 and it's missing a color, they took a card of that color. You don't know what card, but they did take a card of that color. You can sometimes almost reconstruct what cards they've taken though, because you can also see which rarity is missing, right? So you can be like, oh, okay, they must have taken an uncommon in Aggression, and then you can, if you really know the set, you can think, okay, what good uncommons in Aggression are first pickable, right? That's something that you can really do if you're really in the weeds about it. But I digress. As I was saying, if they have 3, or if you see 3 green cards, there's a 42% chance they took green, and if you see 4 green cards, there's only a 32% chance that they took green. Now let's talk about pick 2. It gets a little bit denser here. So let's say you're in pick, sorry, I said pick 2, I meant pick 3. So let's say you're now in pick 3 and you're looking down at cards and you see 2 green cards. So what are the probabilities of the different outcomes? Now, the different outcomes are the person to the right of you took a green card and the person to the right of them did not. The person to the right of you did not take a green card and the person to the right of them did. The person to the right of you and the right of them took a green card, and they both took no green card. Those are the 4 options. Luckily, the probability doesn't really matter between whether they took it and the person to the right of them didn't, or vice versa. Those are equal, or very close to being equal. There's a tiny bit of nuance there, I think, but for the purpose of building intuition, they're equal. So let's talk about, again, what's the probability that no one took a green card? Again, if you see 2, you would expect it to be about 22.6. The probability that, where do I even put my camera? There's good stuff all over the screen here. There we go. The probability that only one person took a green card we see is 56.6%, and the probability that they both took a green card is 20.8%. So, of course, this isn't poker. You don't have to memorize a bunch of tables, a bunch of GTO charts, I think they call them. But it's handy to keep a couple key numbers in mind. The most important one, I think, are the 100% and the 0%, right? So, again, back here, what I was saying. If you see 0 green cards, then you know that someone to the right of you has taken a green card. Good. So in principle, I could have kept doing this for pick 4 and pick 5, but there's more and more probabilities to calculate as we go around the table, so it gets annoying quickly, especially because I wrote this code as kind of a hack job, and it's not particularly good, and so I had to do a lot of plugging numbers in manually. In principle, if I really turned this into a project, I could automate a lot of stuff, but this was very much just a prototype so that I could get curious about some numbers and put a video out. I don't think I'm going to put my code out there because it's just such a nightmare, which points in my favor. You can tell I don't use AI because AI would never write code like this because it makes no sense. But it does get technically the correct answer, just very inefficiently. If you're someone who is really into stats or math, or you just found that really interesting, you can kind of compute those on your own. What you need to do, and you don't necessarily need to do a n equals 1 million pack opening simulation like I did, you can really just kind of approximate a lot of stuff, right? Like you would expect to see around 3 cards in a pack of each color, and then you can sort of napkin math what the probabilities change to as each pick goes down depending on what people to the right of you do, and then you just use Bayes' theorem. If that's something that interests you, give it a go, or if you want me to check any other numbers, feel free to leave a comment and I will see what I can do if it's reasonable. All right, so I have one last piece of advice that I saved for the end. It's possibly the most unhinged piece of advice, but it's that do what you actually enjoy for drafting. Like, not everybody likes all this, thinking about stats stuff and, you know, trying to like optimize everything. It's not for everybody, and that's good. It's not for me sometimes. Sometimes I just want to go and I just want to draft a cool card and I want to play it, and I'll sacrifice EV to do that for sure. Like ultimately, if you don't like doing it and you're just grinding it out to like get more wins, even if it's working and you are getting more wins, you're going to burn out and you're probably going to quit, right? I think I put in my article, I compared it to like cardio, right? Where let's say like you're super motivated to do cardio and you just like hate running. Like if you start running, you're going to lose your motivation pretty quick and you're probably going to stop doing cardio. Whereas if you like spend a little bit of time and think about what's cardio I actually enjoy, right? Like swimming, kickboxing, I don't know, hiking, something like that. That's maybe going to be something that you'll actually stick with a lot longer, even if you're like less immediately gung-ho right out the gate. Sort of the same with draft, right? Like if you had two players, one who like, both of whom who didn't really like the stat stuff, and one who really tried to do it anyway and just kind of burned out after 3 weeks, and one who just went and drafted what they wanted, like 6 months in the future, I guarantee you the guy who just went and drafted what he wanted is going to be a better drafter and a better player than the guy who like has to force himself to do it, right? If you're not enjoying it, you're not going to be consistent and you're not going to keep coming back to draft. So ultimately, this is like kind of cop-out, but the best piece of advice is just draft what you enjoy, and draft what will make you want to keep drafting, because that's how you're actually going to get better. And that is true. That is true. Fact-checked by real Star Wars fans. I've mentioned an article a million times through this video. I'll put it in the description if I remember. But honestly, I kind of just said everything I said here. It does have all of the graphs and stuff I showed though, so that's a good place to look at those, because my face is not in the way of them there. All right, thanks everyone for watching. I have a couple of exciting projects in the pipeline here. Another Jeopardy coming in the next probably 2 months or so. I know that seems like a really long time, but it's going to be a really exciting one. And lots of other cool video ideas. So thanks so much for your like and your subscribe and all that stuff. I really want to hear from you in the comments about your draft experiences. The advice video portion of the video is over now, so only stick around for the next minute if you want to hear me yap. But I did a Carbonite booster draft like a few days ago, and it was super, super fun. And my deck made absolutely no sense. I put a picture of it on my Blue Sky. I'll see if I can remember to put it in the video here. I had like 2 of the Starhawk that halves the cost. I was playing Akbar Green, and I had 2 of the 11 cost capital ships. One of them that was green villainy and one of them that is blue villainy. And if you're paying attention, Akbar Green is yellow green heroism. So the blue villainy one actually cost 15, but my logic was Starhawk, and then it'll half the cost, and then I'll be able to play that, and no one will ever see a 15 drop coming in drafts. I did actually 3-0 that draft, but not because of any of those ships. I really wanted to, but it turns out that when you play the Starhawk, it's usually just, you know, a 6-9, I think, ambush is just good enough on its own, oftentimes to close the games, and you don't need to play a 15 drop next turn. But nevertheless, I had a ton of fun with that draft. I would absolutely do more of those, even though they make a little bit no sense, because you don't expect to see any of the, like, as many of the draft commons and removal that you would expect to see. But it's still fun to do every now and then. I'm going to a Chaos draft tonight. That should be fun, in like half hour actually. So maybe there will be a video about that. I don't know. Who knows? Anything's possible. Anyway, I'm yapping. This game's fun. Draft is fun. God forbid a boy be passionate about something. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. And as always, may the Force be with you.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?